给我们解释了如何定义犹太人，像遵循犹太教生活的也是犹太人，这一点是比较出乎我意料的，不像基督教会通过传教的方式希望大家都皈依。所以我也很好奇，那犹太教和基督教的区别是什么呢？
So Christianity actually originated from Judaism, and Jesus Christ, who was the Messiah of the Christians and also revered as the Son of God, in fact, was a Jewish preacher and teacher and rabbi. And St. Paul, who was the founder of what became the religion of Christianity, was also a learned Jew. And he aimed, together with other early Christians, to bring the fundamental ideas of Judaism, such as monotheism and ethical behavior, to all people and to be universal. Now, in order to make it a universal religion, what Paul had to do was to remove the barriers that Judaism put up. And so in the Christian view, this was an improvement. Of course, for Judaism, the laws and the rituals of our behavior are the essence. So I think it's, that's an important difference. But essentially, to give an example, or to give a few examples, the rituals that Paul abolished were central to Judaism, such as the Shabbat, the Sabbath. Jews do not do any labor on the seventh day from Friday night at sundown until Saturday night dark. We don't do any labor, so we have to observe it's a day of family, a day of rest. Or, for example, we have the laws of what we may and may not eat, the dietary laws, which are called kosher laws. And so there are only certain animals we may eat, like a cow or a sheep, but we're not allowed to eat pork or shellfish. And then also Jewish males have to be circumcised. And all of these, Paul and the early Christians regarded as difficult burdens, and so therefore they said that these can be abolished and you only have to keep the spirit of the law, and that people can reach salvation only through faith in God and in Jesus Christ. And so they changed it in that respect.
所以基督教更是基于信仰，而犹太教更基于行为，对吗？
Yes, so that is 对，是的。
那会不会有不信上帝的犹太教呢？
So the belief in God is indeed central in Judaism. However, it's been subject to interpretation over the centuries. So the truth is that in biblical times, Judaism introduced to the world in the ancient Near East, which was a land where people believed in many gods, in polytheism, that each nation had its own god, Judaism introduced the concept of a universal God who was not dependent on the sacrifices by his own nation or his own temple, but cared more about benevolence to all human beings, to all humankind. So that's called ethical monotheism. But in biblical times, people still imagined God anthropomorphically. That means imagining God in human form, as if he is a father who gets angry or is pleased. But then when the temple was destroyed and the rituals of the temple were abolished, then Jewish ritual moved to the synagogue, to prayer and study, and those became the central modes of worship. And over the centuries, Judaism developed a more abstract and spiritual concept of God that was no longer anthropomorphic. It no longer was a God that was emotional in a human sense. So it was a more abstract and philosophical concept. Now, the greatest Jewish philosopher of all time was Moses Maimonides, and he emphasized that God does not have a body and God is pure spirit. So that moves away from the biblical concept. Now, to answer your question of is it possible for Judaism to exist without belief in God, there actually was one Jewish philosopher in the 20th century that was controversial because he argued that Jewish civilization and culture was valuable in and of itself, and that mode of behavior elevates us as human beings. His name was Mordechai Kaplan, and many people regard him as heretical. But he made a very interesting point that Jewish behavior can exist even if people in the modern times can no longer believe in God. That could never happen with Christianity, where faith is the whole essence, whereas in Judaism, the behavior is beneficial to the human condition even by itself as a culture and as a civilization. So in that respect, perhaps it resembles Confucianism, which is not dependent on a metaphysical conception, but rather is a guide for human behavior.
没错，孔夫子总是教我们什么该做，什么不该做。